and welcome to this optimized session, Acting Orals, the perfect pitch. I'm very excited for this conversation. It's a topic that Visible Thread really haven't covered a whole lot in the past, so it's great to see something new, and I think it fits perfect into this proposal preparation section of Optimize. I really hope you're enjoying all the sessions that you've seen so far. It's been a whirlwind of 2 days. I think this is our 15th or 16th talk. So we've just heard from some fantastic speakers, and we have another fantastic speaker here today with Meredith Roedel. And we're very excited. If you missed anything from the previous sessions, you are more than welcome to go back to the landing page. Everything is on demand. We'll be sharing the recordings with everybody next week, but you should be able to access all the recordings on the landing page. And we'd just like to thank you for your participation. Today's presentation on acting orals, this is on acing orals. This is a live presentation, so we would love to have your live questions. So like all the optimized presentations to date, feel free to get involved in the attendee chat. Let us know where you're coming from. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in, and we've earmarked some time at the end to answer as many questions as we possibly can. So without further ado, Meredith, it's really lovely to welcome you here today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Michal.
You're very good. Meredith, would you like to start by just maybe introducing yourself and
Sure.
telling people, about Spire proposals, etc.?
Sure, of course. So as Michal had said, my name is Meredith Roedel, and my company is Spire Creative Solutions. We support all facets, soup to nuts, in the proposal process. And I'm really excited to have all of you here today to focus on oral presentations. This is something that is of particular importance to me. It's actually my favorite element of the work that we get to do. And I've been supporting orals all the way back since 2007. That was when we won a contract to provide program management services for a school district's capital improvement program. Since that time, I've supported many oral interviews for both federal customers and for SLED customers, which is state, local, and education. I've also facilitated selection committees and sat as a procurement specialist on the other side of the table and seen a number of different presentations made in order to win contracts. And it was really through that experience that I gained different perspective and unique understanding of what works, and hearing from the selection committees directly while they were discussing the attributes of the proposals, or excuse me, the presentations, and what they liked and didn't like. So all that said, you guys have, I'm sure, heard a lot about AI over the last couple days here, and just in general right now, that's where the buzz is. What's interesting is the focus on AI actually requires more of a focus on orals. And the reason I say that, it's a natural progression. When all the proposals have access to similar tools and they start to look similar, and the words sound more alike, they look more alike because everything's brought to higher standard, what's going to differentiate your team from another team is the oral interviews. And governments are going to lean more into that coming forward. So orals were introduced in the federal procurement space back in 1994. And even though that format's been around for a long time now, there's at least 4 other reasons besides AI that I really think that this is the prime time for orals to come to prevalence. And let's start with those. So one is that they can now be done a lot more economically, like what we're on this platform now with On24, with other platforms that you obviously probably used, like Zoom and Teams. They're ubiquitous. They're everywhere. Everyone's used them. So it removes a lot of the travel costs or the logistical or scheduling barriers, and makes it a lot lower level of entry, no barriers to entry, to use orals for reviewing different team members. Or excuse me, different teams. So another reason is that the DOJ, they've placed a huge emphasis on efficiency. And because of that, it's likely to require shorter proposals, which have a oral component. Also, the confidence rating over the traditional scoring rubrics, it aids in faster decision-making. And even though that's been around for a few decades now, it is still seen as innovative because it's not at the forefront, and there's such an emphasis on innovation that that's also another reason that orals are really in their about to be coming to their prime heyday here. So, and then the fourth reason that I have is that they provide real-time insights into the expertise, the team chemistry, the understanding of the work, and they reveal how the team members collaborate, how they think on their feet, and how they communicate with one another. So there's lots of reasons that we're really going to be seeing orals come forward, I believe. All right, so as we all know, in developing proposals, it's critical to have an understanding of your audience and to try to tap into their pain points and develop win themes around that. Now, earlier this year, I was part of the APMP's Leadership Academy, and one of the things that they had used ChatGPT for was to generate a persona for our stakeholders. And I thought, man, that's so clever. That's something I hadn't done before, hadn't occurred to me. But I've started to use ChatGPT to look at personas for selection committees and in other capacities. So in preparing this presentation here today, I thought, why not? Why not go ahead and ask ChatGPT who is going to be in the room for this presentation I'm making, and what would the challenges be that they're facing? And so this is representative of all of you, what they came up with, and that's that the challenges are coaching technical SMEs who lack presentation experience, making technical content more engaging, and starting each oral's effort from scratch without a process. So we're going to talk through some different solutions to those items, along with a lot of other material that you're going to have today that you can put into direct effect. And a lot of this, frankly, crosses over where it's helpful certainly for orals, but just for presentations in general and for networking for a lot of different applications in life. So I hope you're able to internalize some really clear takeaways from all of this. And as Michal said at the end, I'm very happy to answer questions and help you, get to the solutions you're looking for. So, all right, let's keep going. As I said, in an ideal world, you're going to know your customer. Sometimes you actually can be given names for the selection committee. And in those situations, I'll actually do research. I'll go on to social media, try to find pictures of the people. I will bring those in, kind of put together a little dossier for my team, for the people who are part of the interview team, and I'll bring that to them. And really what happens there is it puts them more at ease. When you remove the fear of the unknown, when they can look at a face and say, oh, that person's smiling, I think that they're going to be an easy person to talk to. We have this in common. We both like football, or whatever the case may be. It creates a little bit more of a comfort level for your team before they even go through that door to conduct their interviews. So it reduces stress. So my tip number one is to research your evaluators, create personas for the different types of evaluator roles, and share that information with your team. Now, orals interviews are not all created equally. They do come in a number of different shapes and sizes. And as I mentioned at the start, I have nearly 2 decades of orals experience. So in just the second half of 2024, I had the opportunity to work on 3 different orals teams for 3 U.S. federal agencies' high-stake projects. I'm going to take 2 of those and use those as case studies here, and I'm going to add in one that is from the SLED. It's a higher education project that we did that I'm going to compare and contrast how these different oral formats and structures were set up. And there's a lot more that I've encountered, and I'd be happy to delve into those either through this discussion here, or certainly reach out to me if there's anything else I can add to help you. So the first one I'm calling Full Metal Briefing. This is real life story number 1. This first scenario, it was by invitation. You had to pass the go, no-go threshold to get over phase 1 to even be included in the oral interview process. It was remote by Teams, roughly 2-hour-long presentation in place of the technical proposal. So this was a complete substitution where we didn't submit a formal technical. We had phase 1 submissions, but they weren't the technical proposal. The challenge here was that our 5 presenters had to address a total of 23 very complex, often multi-part questions within their time frame. They also had introductions too. So the challenge was getting all of that material without missing any of the details and without having someone kind of run on or go rogue and ramble. So we actually chose to do a fully scripted PowerPoint presentation. It had really intense, highly detailed custom graphics that were prepared for that. And we stayed pretty much on track to the script. There was, because we had practiced so much, there was some comfort level with the material and they were able to talk to it, but it was largely to the script to be pointed to at what we wanted to say. One of the challenges with this one is that for that complexity, that level of complexity, we only had 20 days from when the RFP dropped is what they initially had given us as the date. As it turned out, we did end up getting a little more time with an extension, but that urgency, that initial sense of urgency was a huge component or challenge that we faced within getting this team up and running. So the second scenario here is we had a contracting officer that held firmly to the projected schedules, and the orals were conducted 22 days after the proposal submission, just as had been projected. It was a full day event. We got there 8 o'clock and were there the whole day. For this one, a good portion of the presentation was scripted, the introductions. They were very robust, and each key personnel team member had their own introduction, and those were supported by PowerPoint slides that were developed in advance. However, this had a problem-solving component. So they were given spontaneously 2 very complex questions, given 3 hours to solution, and then had a 1-hour presentation followed by questions and answers. So it was pretty intense. For this one, because we were in that same room all day, we brought in everything. We brought in the flip charts, the markers, the easels, the laptops, the clock, the food for the day. We brought it all in with a wagon and just worked through it. And then at the end, what was interesting is all the notes and everything, all the documentation had to be left behind. But what was also different about this one is they allowed for observers to be there. So we had a corporate official from our team, and then we had 2 observers, and I was one of the support staff, one of the 2 support staff that were allowed to participate. From what I understand, this is really kind of a typical format that goes back into the 90s and some of the earlier ways that this was done. So, all right, and then our third story, as I mentioned, I promised a SLED story. This one was required by the state statute that they had to have an interview because it crossed a threshold on value. It was for an architectural services, and it had a short fuse. They had 3 firms that were to be interviewed, and that was announced just 6 days after the proposals were submitted. So we were gearing up early. We were proactive on this. The interviews were conducted 8 days after the notice. And we did develop scripted presentations here, did use PowerPoint. It was remote, but the presenters on this were pretty experienced. And so they took a more extemporaneous approach to the delivery, which I'll speak to that and hear a little bit more as we go. So tip number 2 is to carefully consider the implications of the presentation's format and structure. Ask questions early for clarifications if they're needed. And for instance, like you might ask for a schematic of the room if you're presenting in person. They might not give it to you, but it's best to have as much information as possible when you're preparing. Okay, so now we're going to switch over to discussing the foundational elements of any presentation. This is a great quote by Robert McKee. He says, "You must shape your story in a way that both expresses your vision and satisfies your audience's desires." We're going to talk about how to do that. So the foundations of an effective presentation. You might have heard this referenced before as a 3-legged stool. There's the content, the visuals, and the delivery. If you hit all 3 of these, that's your trifecta. That's when you hit the target. But the target is not just those foundations. What we really need to do is to grab attention, achieve persuasion, inspire retention, and spark action. You want people to listen to what you have to say. You want them to be persuaded to your perspective. You want it to be memorable, and you want them to score you highly so that you get the award. So we're going to focus first on attention. This is a goldfish. Did you know that the average attention span of a goldfish is just 9 seconds? For a group of humans here, according to a Microsoft Corporation study, in this age of technology that we're currently in, the average attention span for humans is a mere 8 seconds. So if your presentation stinks, people will zone out, they'll check out, they'll check their phones. We've got to actively work to capture and sustain attention. So how do we do that? The human brain is genetically hardwired to notice 4 things. And that's according to Sharon Bowman, who's written a book called Using Brain Science to Make Training Stick. She talks about how our brains will routinely tune out anything that is repetitive, predictive, boring. And in contrast, we'll notice these 4 things. So let's talk about them. We're going to look more closely. Starting with novelty. Novelty is when something is new or unexpected, it stands out. Contrast, when something looks different from what it's around or what came before it. Meaning. Meaning is when it has personal relevance or significance. I'm going to just pause on this one for a second. Now, obviously, what you're looking at is a picture of a race of some kind. And this is actually an example from a proposal where the program manager on a big project was a runner. He had awards around his office. He had trophies, certificates, medals, would talk about running. That was what he did on his free time. So being an incumbent, the proposal slogan was "in full stride," and we were able to capitalize on that existing relationship and as to grab attention. And what it even did is it moved us over into emotion, because emotion is the most powerful of the 4 different ways to grab attention. And that program manager rather, he would have an emotional connection to those words in full stride that would resonate within him. That might have triggered excitement about thinking those last few strides of the marathon, or he might have had a feeling of being seen, of being recognized, or just even within that piles of different proposals that he would have, that one would stand out because of how it connected with him on a personal level. And that's what emotions really do. They increase attention, which in turn also helps with retention. So those are where we want to target into when possible. Now, the bottom line is you want to stand out from your competition. Lean into those things that are your discriminators. What makes you different? So we're going to switch over now into persuasion and talk some about that. And we're going to start off with Aristotle's 5 rhetorical devices for persuasion. So ethos is the focusing on the character and the credibility of the speaker. Speaker must appear knowledgeable and trustworthy and morally upright in order to persuade an audience effectively. In orals, this extends to the reputation of the company that the speaker represents. In the introduction, it's valuable to articulate your background, and this is for the KPs, the presenters, their qualifications, some relevant past successes. This establishes your authority and helps you build trust with your audience. You want to show that that you understand the priorities and values of your evaluators and tailor your language and examples to resonate with their expectations. You want to use clear, confident language and maintain a composed demeanor. If the orals team members appear to like each other and sincerely respect each other, that goes a long way to functioning cohesively and towards their perceived ethos. So logos is the next one here. And logos is based on logical arguments and reasoning, using facts, statistics, and evidence to persuade. Outline the problem in your proposed solution and the benefits logically. Organize your key points in a clear, sequential manner. Next, we have pathos, or emotion. Pathos appeals to the evaluator's emotion, sense of feelings like fear, excitement, confidence. It motivates them to act or think in a particular way. In presentations, can also be include carefully using humor. Now, that's not something that you want to do. If it's not your normal manner of being, if you're not a funny person to start with, it's probably not the best time to try out a new stand-up routine. So You really want to lean into whatever your natural, authentic way is. And if you're funny, it can be used with caution. Personal stories, though, we all have personal stories. And that's where you want to pull those vivid examples and weave them into your orals to make your team more relatable. Be authentic, let your passion shine, and inspire and motivate your evaluators. Kairos emphasizes the importance of timing and making an argument at the opportune moment. And telos refers to the goal or the end purpose of the persuasive message. It guides the speaker to tailor the message towards achieving their goals. And in our case, it's going to be winning the contract. So let's switch over here to Cialdini, Robert Cialdini. He is known for his 7 principles of persuasion. Sometimes you'll see 6, but there's currently 7. So on these, they do have commonalities and some overlaps with what we just looked at from Aristotle, but they offer additional insights, and it's a more modern tradition. So we're going to look at these as well. Now, by strategically incorporating these principles, you can help to build rapport, you can establish credibility, and you can motivate your audience to support your team. So we'll start off with reciprocity. Reciprocity is offering value upfront. You begin by sharing useful insights or complementary advice that relates to the client's challenges or the customer's challenges. This it creates the implicit obligation for the interviewers to reciprocate your generosity by considering your proposal favorably. Now, I'll give you an example of this. Back in 2013, again, I was working as a procurement specialist for a school district within a major US city. We were procuring an architect for a new high school, and I was facilitating the selection committees. We had shortlisted the proposals to just the top 3 that we were interviewing. One of the architects brought in a civil engineer as part of their presentation team. And that civil engineer, they explained some different nuances of the features of our site that we had not at that point fully considered. And that architect, it was kind of gratis. It was something that was above and beyond what was required for the interview, but it was something that brought value to us. And that architect, they won. So let's look at the next. The next one is commitment and consistency. So start with small agreements. Early in the interview, show how you're aligned with shared objectives or values. For instance, you might point out areas of agreement, such as the importance of innovation or efficiency. With social proof, you want to highlight success stories. Share case studies or examples of similar projects that have yielded positive outcomes. Demonstrate that others in similar industries or roles have benefited from your solutions. Mention endorsements from well-respected clients or industry leaders to reinforce that your approach has been validated by others, which then thereby reduces the perception of risk. For authority, that showcases expertise, that clearly communicates your credentials, your relevant experience, certifications, or awards. You want to use concrete data and examples to back up your claims. For liking, we're trying to build personal rapport. You establish a friendly, relatable connection with the interviewers. You share personal anecdotes, illustrate your passion and your commitment to solving their challenges. Emphasize some common and shared values. When the interviewers feel a personal connection, they're more likely to view your proposal from a position of trust and openness. For scarcity, we want to emphasize unique benefits. You might point out what makes your proposal stand out from the other ones. Highlight exclusive features or unique insights that won't be available elsewhere. This could include your specific key personnel. You want to clearly articulate why now is the optimal time to implement your solution, be it due to the market conditions, a technology window, or some competitive advantage. And finally, unity. That's fostering a sense of we. We're stressing the common ground between you and the customer. We want to emphasize that you are partnering, working together towards a shared vision or goal, and you want to use language that underscores that collaboration. You want to say things like, together we can, or our shared mission. You want to make the evaluators feel that your proposal aligns with their own aspirations and their own culture. So these tools for persuasion, they're particularly important to the content as you're developing that, but we're also going to be discussing how they can be applied to a lesser degree within visuals and delivery. So we're going to move on to retention. So audiences remember the first thing they see or hear, the last thing they see or hear, and your repeated points. You want to be very thoughtful about your introduction and your conclusion. And if your proposal has some kind of slogan or tagline, how you can incorporate that in a meaningful way. We're incredibly good at remembering pictures. According to Brain Rules by John Medina, if you simply hear a piece of information, 3 days later, you'll remember about 10% of it. If you add in a picture or visualization, you'll remember up to 65%. In other words, visuals have the potential to increase retention by 55%. It's important to have a strong call to action. Summarize the key benefits of your proposal, stress the unique aspects of your offer, and your readiness, that you're ready to start as soon as possible. Ask for the job. A lot of people forget that part. Now that we've addressed those central elements of our target or our objectives, we're going to take a step back and move through the three foundational elements: the content, the visuals, and the delivery. So we'll start with content. Content's going to vary greatly. Frankly, it's going to be based on your proposal and the specific instructions of the solicitation. I'm just going to share some common universal generalities that will apply. So to determine the content, your approach to your presentation, you really look at it a lot like you do a proposal. What you want to do is examine the requirements, set up an outline. Remember that story I shared at the beginning with the full metal briefing? That one, before they had issued amendments, we actually had 26 questions. They knocked a few of them off through amendment, but we had 26 complex multi-part questions that had to be addressed within that 2-hour span. It was intimidating. I'll just be honest about it. It was a little bit overwhelming of what we were trying to accomplish because of the level of detail that had to be incorporated. You have to break it down to small pieces. You know, what felt like mission impossible, we were able to basically compartmentalize it into different areas. And instead of allocating page numbers to a topic, you would allocate minutes. So we figured out, okay, these are all the minutes that we have. How much time do we need? How long? And where do we want to put our emphasis? And you kind of work backwards from that. So one of the techniques that I often use for brainstorming, and there's a number of different ways. You can use online platforms like Mural, which is fantastic. But one of the kind of old school ways I will use is to set a timer and use Post-it notes and write down every little idea that comes within, like, as fast as I can, a 5-minute span on Post-it notes, and then arrange those into groupings and look for common threads and try to basically weave together the story the way that I want it to go based on what the important responses are to the questions. But the bottom line is you got to break it down to small pieces. So an analysis of 500 of the most popular TED Talks revealed a compelling pattern. Storytelling, or pathos in Aristotle's terms, it accounts for 65% of the average talk, while 25% focuses on logic or logos, and 10% on credibility or ethos. In other words, the secret to a successful TED Talk is framing the big idea within a story. You want to do the same thing as much as you can. So adding stories doesn't just engage the audience, it also increases knowledge retention by 26%. So helps on multiple fronts. It does highlight the power of storytelling and presentations, and we want to take the time to collect and think about and refine your stories and consider how they can be woven in. One of the most powerful stories your presenters can use is to talk about how they got into the industry, why they're passionate about their work. If you haven't already watched Simon Sinek's TED Talk, How Great Leaders Inspire Action, it's back from 2009, but it's still very relevant today. I encourage you to carve out the 20 minutes to do that. It's one of the most viewed TED Talks of all time, and it's really a great starting point if you have oral presenters reflect on why they're pursuing the positions associated with the interview. What is their why? If you remember back at the beginning when I was sharing those real life stories, in real life story number 2, the one I called Bring Your Own Everything, our lead director for that project had just phenomenal personal stories of passion and overcoming obstacles to achieve her dreams. And she incorporated many of those inspiring anecdotes within our session. They were relevant, but they also helped the evaluators and interviewers get to know her in a meaningful way. So let's move on to Aristotle's Logos and consider how we might incorporate metrics. What you see here, this quote says, regardless of what industry you're in, the numbers you throw around will have little impact on your audience unless you make them meaningful. So let's talk about that. I'll give you a couple specific proposal-related examples of types of metrics to avoid. For instance, our customer engagement increased by 50%. Well, what does that mean? What's the baseline? How's it being measured? Is that time on site? Is it number of interactions? Is it repeat visits? Another one, our team has 150 years of experience. This one is, frankly, it's a personal pet peeve of mine. What does that mean? You know, is that for the companies that are there? Is that the individuals? How many individuals make up that 150 years? You know, just be cautious as you're developing your content and your metrics that they're clear and they're meaningful, that they're not just trying to get to a big number. Also, I have one watch out for all of you in terms of content, and that's within our respective industries, it can be quite common to use acronyms and jargon. Unless you're completely sure all your members of the evaluation committee are tracking with you and understand what you're saying, it's wise to define those acronyms the first time you use them. You know, we want to be mindful that our content's not so bogged down and heavily laden with acronyms that it's difficult to understand. So we're going to shift over to visuals next. Vision dominates all our other senses. 90% of information transmitted to the brain is visual. Reading is inefficient for us. Our brain sees words as lots of tiny little pictures, and we have to identify those certain features for letters to be able to be read and understood. And that takes time. I mean, we don't necessarily perceive it because we're used to it, but it does take time and energy. We go back to the book by John Medina, Brain Rules. He points out that more physical space in the brain is dedicated to visuals than any of our other senses. Visuals are processed 60,000 times faster than text by the human brain. So images act like a shortcut. We're visual creatures. We're programmed to react to visuals more than words. Therefore, it's especially important to carefully design your slides if you're using them. And if your orals are an interview format that has questions and answers or problem solving, try to be proactive on that and look for opportunities or ways to include graphics. And if acceptable, if you can do that, practice in advance and think through some different simple diagrams that will help to illustrate your points and practice those pre-planned graphics on flip charts, if that's allowed. All right, now if you're providing slides as part of the presentation, the slides should have a similar look to the written proposal, such as the colors and the graphics and just the feel, so that there's a unity between the different documents. They should have clear structure that helps the evaluator to know where you are within the materials. If those questions are being addressed, it's helpful to present some kind of wayfinding, like numbers. Like sometimes they'll be very prescriptive within a list of elements that you have to address in your orals. Here you see that like we have numbers on the screen, so each of the different numbers could be tracked along and they would know, the interviewers would know where we are along the way. So use consistent variations on the design to indicate when you're transitioning from one section to another, similar to like a tab in a written proposal. Also include visuals on your slides whenever you can. You know, make them visual. Keep them simple. Use text that is easily readable. Divide up the content so that each slide is only making one point. Add an image of the speaker to help the presenter stay on track, and for virtual interviewers especially, where the presenter might not be seen while the slides are showing. So we're going to switch now over to delivery, and there's a whole lot of considerations to look at within delivery, but we're going to focus more on the ones that are universal, especially, with technology. We could look at details on remote and virtual presentations, but I'm going to just try to keep this a little bit more of a high level and answer specific questions at the end if you happen to have them. There's 4 primary types of delivery, and I've spoke about this at the very beginning just a little bit, but there's impromptu, which is spoken spontaneously with minimal preparation. There is manuscript, where the speech is read word for word. Memorized, where it's delivered from memory. And extemporaneous, which strikes a balance between preparation and spontaneity. That last approach, it's often the most effective. It does require practice to master, but extemporaneous speaking allows for better preparation than impromptu. It reduces the risk of forgetting key points compared to memorization, and it feels more natural and engaging than reading from a script. So it enables your audience to connect with it enables your speakers to connect with their audience while maintaining both structure and authenticity. Check. All right, as mentioned, there really are a slew of delivery considerations. We're really going to just dive into a few of those here. But not all of these apply. It depends a lot on whether or not you are performing in person or virtually. Those are just some things, though, that if you are working on a presentation, you would want to keep in mind. So we'll start off with stage presence. Oral interviews and presentations share many similarities with theater. High energy conveys genuine enthusiasm, and that can create an emotional connection with the audience. When a speaker is passionate and engaged, their energy becomes infectious. They're encouraging their audience to mirror that excitement and to stay more involved. People naturally connect with those who appear invested in their message. In short, enthusiasm is contagious. Capture your evaluator's attention by bringing energy, passion, and charisma to your delivery. One of the techniques that works especially well in person is to use silence to capture and focus attention. So at the beginning of a presentation when it's live, before I say anything, I will stand on the stage in that kind of uncomfortable zone for 2 seconds. I know that doesn't sound like much, but 2 seconds of complete silence will focus all of the audience on you. They'll be looking at you, waiting, anticipating, seeing what's going to come next. How are you going to break that silence? So that strategic pause, it creates a little bit of novelty. It makes discomfort, but in a good way. It also allows you to emphasize key points and make them more memorable. By adding a brief pause, coupled with a subtle nod, you can, after delivering your statements, you can reinforce your message and highlight important words. So I suggest you embrace the power of the pause. Pace yourself. While it's great to add energy and animation to your presentation, be mindful not to rush. If you naturally speak quickly, which I do, I'm sure you guys have noticed, practice slowing down a little. On the other hand, if you tend to be a little bit more slow, do consider trying to pick up the pace a bit to keep your audience engaged. Albert Mehrabian, he was professor emeritus at UCLA. He was one of the foremost communication researchers, and he was able to, through some studies, determine that 38% of our communication happens through the vocal quality. So if you're speaking too slowly or in a monotone, that can really impact how your audience perceives your competency. It can help them or make them lose interest or disengage. If we have effective voice modulation and we adjust for the pitch, pace, and tone, it helps to add emphasis and meaning to our words. If you do speak too quickly, your audience will struggle to keep up. If you're too slow, they might lose interest and go to sleep. So either way, your message won't land effectively and your presentation goals might fall short. Your voice is one of the most powerful tools that you have as a presenter, but it's crucial to use it wisely. Find the right volume and tone, highlight keywords and expressions, and enunciate clearly. Articulation refers to the clear and precise pronunciation of words. To improve clarity, slow down slightly and focus on enunciating each word. Speak from your diaphragm rather than your throat to project your voice effectively. Avoid mumbling. Make it easy for your evaluators to understand your points without effort. Use calm and open body language. Gesturing helps to convey authenticity. Don't cross your arms or put your hands over your mouth. Don't use the same gestures that can become distracting if you use them repeatedly over and over again. You want to try to appear natural. And if you're remote and on camera, you can lean in to show engagement. Sometimes, frankly, you have to amplify your expressiveness when you're on camera because you lose that immediacy of the energy when you're in the room together. So facial expressions are universal and powerful form of communication. As Daniel Pink explains in A Whole New Mind, he says that research shows that people can accurately interpret emotions solely through facial expressions, even without tone or body language. When presenting, facial expressions help convey conviction and energy. And when listening, if you're on the team and one of your other presenters is on a dialogue or a monologue rather, and you're listening, you want to show engagement with subtle gestures like nodding or tilting your head. You don't want to overdo it, but you want to keep your mouth closed when you're not speaking, and you want to focus on the person who is speaking. A forced artificial smile, it can be off-putting. So we want to have real smiles. We want to involve our eyes and our mouth. There's a neurologist named Duchenne de Bologna. He found that we can control our mouth muscles, but true enjoyment activates the eyes as well. And to spot a fake smile, you just have to look at the eyes. They're not going to reflect that true, genuine happiness. When that happens, you're actually eroding trust. So a key takeaway is don't fake it. A real smile should come naturally when something is genuinely amusing or pleasing to you. And speaking of smiles, research from Uppsala University in Sweden found that seeing someone smile can override our usual control over facial muscles. So it makes it almost instinctive to smile in return. It's surprisingly difficult to frown when someone is smiling at us. And British researchers discovered that a single smile can stimulate the brain as much as 2,000 chocolate bars. Meanwhile, a Penn State study revealed that smiling not only makes us seem more likable and polite, but also more competent. So beyond its social benefits, a genuine smile engages the eyes and the cheeks, it opens your nasal passages, it activates your diaphragm, and improves your breathing. This all in turn enhances your speech's clarity in making the words come out more naturally and effectively and more persuasively. So at the end of the day, like Bob Berg says here, all things being equal, people will do business with and refer business to those that they know, like, and trust. Our goal through the oral interview process is to get the evaluators to get to know you, to get to like you, and to trust you. And at the beginning, I started with an open loop. I talked about 3 different real life stories that came in with results. For the sled one, we had instant gratification that we were a winner. For the Bring Your Own Everything decathlon, that one was canceled by the Doge. So we had to start that one over here. And then the third one was a real life story that was also a win. And that was a $276 million contract with the Army. So I've gone a little bit closer to time than I intended, but we're at the end of this year. I really thank you for being with me here today and ask that you connect with me on LinkedIn. Right there's a little QR code if you'd like to do it that way. And I do open the floor for questions. So Michal, if there's anything you got queued up, I'm happy to address what I can.
You're very good. Meredith, thank you so much. That was so insightful. I really, really enjoyed it. The oral presentations and kind of PowerPoint prep is something that's very close to my heart. But yeah, I could ask you questions all day. I definitely have a few from the audience to start off with, but
Sure.
there was one nice one from Angela. You were showing a lot of kind of graphical representation, some imagery throughout the presentation. She complimented you on the look of your own presentation, but then commented often in federal presentations, it can be deemed that like images aren't scored, therefore they might be unnecessary. And there could be a want to get rid of imagery to save on length of presentation, amount of slides, etc. Do you have any tips and tricks or advice for someone who's fighting for imagery to be in the presentation?
Honestly, I mean, at the end of the day, you have to be compliant. So, if that isn't allowed or isn't going to be scored well, then you have to make adjustments. Certainly, there are actually full-blown proposals that are submitted via an oral interview. I've been part of that as well, where we had all the words had to be on the slides, and they were very, very dense and heavy, and we could only say what was on the slides. So you got to just make adjustments really based on the nature of what the requirement is from the government. That's the bottom line. I mean, in an ideal world, yes, we'll have visuals, and but you can't always have what you want.
Sure. I saw a really interesting example at an APMP event where it had two cogs, but the cogs wouldn't work in reality. So it was trying to show unification and a process that's working really well, but the way the cogs are designed, if they were actually in reality, they wouldn't have worked. So it was an interesting. Imagery can be really important, but if someone picks up on that, it can look like a funny mistake or something that's not kind of reality. So be careful on the images you do use, but it's very, very interesting. Meredith, you mentioned at the beginning a little bit about AI, and we've talked about a lot of AI from a written perspective. Have you played around with using AI to help you draft, like maybe your pitch structure? Have you done much like that yet?
Not so much, frankly. I've done maybe a little bit, but it's really, I think it's more aligning it to the proposal and you trying to get the win themes that have already been presented in most cases. Most interviews are subsequent after the proposal has been submitted, and so you want to look for consistency there. But you certainly could use it to refine a presentation. There are tools actually that will help gauge your pace, and we'll look at the way that you do things. There are AI tools that will actually evaluate your presentation skills.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned some great authors and books throughout your presentation, Meredith. There's a one here. We're happy to list them afterwards and send them to attendees.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you have any favorite author from your perspective? I know you've mentioned a lot throughout it.
Yeah, I actually didn't talk about her in this this presentation here today, but Nancy Duarte is one of my absolute favorites. She talks about presentation skills, so.
And I know you mentioned Simon Sinek. Simon Sinek actually has come up quite a lot over the course of the last 2 days.
I'm not surprised.
I'm a fanatic there, but yeah, it was very nicely weaved in, and I shared the video actually in the attendee chat that you were referencing.
Oh, great! Thank you.
Very good. One other question then from Lee. For unsuccessful presentations, do you typically ask for debriefs or feedback? Have you ever done that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I have, there's sometimes they'll even give you the recording. Like we have a recent federal presentation where they told you right out in the RFP from the get-go that if you request it after award, they'll give you the full 4-hour recording of the entire session. So I do, of course, ask for debriefs, which you should ask even if you win. Even if you're successful, you should ask so you can get insights that you can use for going forward.
Very good. Meredith, in a slightly different life to Visible Thread, I work in a university and I teach some marketing courses, and I truly believe orals and presentations is going to be such a high factor, and I can see younger generations struggling with it initially because maybe they weren't expecting it to kind of layer out they're not expecting it to be such a key part of university level. When AI kind of hit 2-3 years ago, in my university, we made a big shift into oral presentations because we didn't want everything generated by AI. We wanted to see people's personalities, to see the hard work. And I think that's going to layer itself out into industry more and more. And I think the tips that you're sharing, albeit albeit kind of traditional and kind of best practice and foundational, I think will be, I think there'll be core skills to have. Do you have any advice for like younger, maybe people starting their careers and proposals for, how to become a little bit more confident when it comes to presentations?
That's a good one. I think probably, just familiarizing yourself with the resources that are out there. I often recommend, Nancy Duarte has a TED Talk that also is just spectacular, that she talks about her Spark line, which is it's a format that the best presentations follow. And so I would just, advise people to educate themselves and practice. At the end of the day, I mean, just anything that we do, that we practice, we're going to become more proficient at it.
No, well said. I was super engaged in what you said. There's some really nice elements in it, and in fact, I really like the use your own personality. I've been told several times, don't try to be funny if you're not funny. People have told me this so several times. But I love the way you explain that. I think that's a really key factor, that like you shouldn't shy away from putting your own personality in it, but there is probably guardrails there too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And ask people for feedback. If you think that you're funny and you're trying to crack jokes in there, like ask for candid feedback from the rest of your team. They're like, hey, am I like throwing us in a wrong direction here and skewing the way that we want to be perceived? And hopefully you'll have people that you trust that can give you the right answers on that.
Totally. Meredith, you mightn't agree with this, but I played around a little bit with like AI from a like a subjective review kind of scenario. So I've often like put in things that I've written, or I have like even recorded myself video wise, or like a transcript recording, and I put it into like generic tools like ChatGPT and things like that when it's not restrictive stuff, when it's kind of public things. And I've asked it for feedback, and it'd be really interesting what they might come back with, like in terms of my pace. Maybe something isn't very clear. Maybe I didn't summarize at the end. I've gotten some really good feedback and things. So that's a tip. I don't know. It's subjective. It's up to you if you really feel like it's accurate or not. But I found it very helpful to get feedback when you're in a bit of drafting mode, I suppose.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think use any tool that you can, ethically and responsibly, to help move things forward. Absolutely.
Now, Meredith, I want to thank you for your time and the effort that you went into doing that presentation. It's fabulous. Like it's really clear, and you're getting an amazing comments in the attendee chat. Best or presentation I've seen. You're getting loads of love hearts and all that kind of stuff. Is there any final words you'd like to give to the audience while you have them?
Well, I think if you guys have any questions, I love helping people. I mean, at my core, that's really why I'm here, is to be able to share what I've learned over my couple decades. So, please don't be frustrated by something you don't know. Reach out, and I'd be happy to help if it's something that I can.
I appreciate you. Meredith, thank you so much for your time. A good presentation, I think, always lands on time, and you perfectly did with 5 minutes to go. So I'll just, before I leave the audience, I'll just promote the next session. So next session is using past performance to restructure and optimize your future bids. So we're moving into the final phase of the RFP lifecycle. We're talking about post-award. We're looking at, okay, how do we learn from the past mistakes? How do we learn from the past wins? How do we use that information in a really smart way? That conversation is going to be a panel discussion led by BTW, who are a consultancy based out of DC. And yeah, I think it's going to be a fabulous session. You'll be redirected directly after this session to that. And like I said, everything will be recorded and sent next week as well. So Meredith, thank you so much for your time, and thank you all who attended and listened in.
My pleasure. Thank you all. Good luck.